I never should have stopped. That's what everyone says when they hear my story. But they weren't there. They didn't see his eyes. It was just past midnight, and I was driving home from a late shift at the hospital. The rural road stretched out before me, a ribbon of black cutting through the dense woods. My headlights carved a path through the darkness, illuminating the occasional reflective eyes of animals watching from the tree-line. I'd made this drive 100 times before, but something felt different that night. The air inside my car seemed heavier and the shadows deeper. I chalked it up to exhaustion and cranked up the radio, hoping the music would keep me alert for the last few miles. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought my tired mind was playing tricks on me. A splash of white against the inky blackness, a flash of red. I blinked hard, but the figure remained, growing clearer as I approached. A clown, standing perfectly still on the side of the road. My foot instinctively eased off the gas pedal. As the car slowed, I could make out more details. The clown's face was painted with an exaggerated frown, tear-like streaks running from his eyes. His costume was dirty and torn, as if he'd been wandering through the woods. But it was the sign he held that made my blood run cold. "Help me," scrawled in what looked like red paint. Or was it blood? I knew I should keep driving. Every instinct screamed at me to floor it and not look back. But something in the clown's posture, the defeated slump of his shoulders, made me hesitate. What if he really did need help? What if he'd been in an accident or was running from something even worse? I couldn't just leave someone stranded out here, could I? My hand hovered over the gear shift, ready to accelerate past. But then I made the mistake of looking directly into the clown's eyes. They were human eyes, filled with a desperation that cut through the makeup and costume. In that moment, I saw past the unsettling appearance to the person underneath. Someone lost, afraid, and alone. I pulled over. The gravel crunched under my tires as I brought the car to a stop about 20 feet from the clown. I left the engine running and the headlights on, illuminating the strange scene before me. "Hey!" I called out through the cracked window. "Are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" The clown didn't respond. He just stood there, holding his sign, staring at me with those pleading eyes. I should have driven away then, but I didn't. Instead, I opened my door and stepped out into the cool night air. The woods seemed to press in around us, the darkness beyond my headlights absolute. "Sir," I tried again, taking a cautious step forward. "Or, ma'am? I'm sorry. I can't really tell. Look, are you hurt? Do you need a ride somewhere?" Still no response. Just those eyes, boring into me. I was about 10 feet away when I heard it. A rustling in the woods behind the clown, too heavy to be a small animal. My heart leapt into my throat. "Hey!" I said, my voice quavering slightly. "I think there's something in the woods. We should probably get in the car, okay?" The clown finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his sign. And then, to my horror, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was wide and cruel, stretching unnaturally across his painted face. I stumbled backward, my flight response finally kicking in, but I'd waited too long. From the woods emerged two more figures. Clowns, their makeup garish and terrifying in the harsh glare of my headlights. They moved with an eerie grace, flanking their companion on the road. I ran. My feet slipped on the loose gravel as I scrambled for my car. I could hear them behind me, their heavy breathing and the jingle of bells on their costumes. I reached for the door handle, yanking it open, but a gloved hand slammed it shut. I spun around, my back pressed against the cold metal of my car. The three clowns surrounded me, their painted faces leering. "Please," I gasped. "I was just trying to help. I'll leave. I won't tell anyone I saw you. Just let me go." The clown with the sign tilted his head, considering. Then he nodded to his companions. I braced myself, certain this was the end, but instead of attacking, they stepped back. The one closest to me gestured toward my car door. Confused and shaking, I fumbled with the handle and practically fell into the driver's seat. I slammed the door and locked it, my trembling hands struggling to find the right key. As I started the engine, I looked up. The clowns had retreated to the side of the road. They stood in a line, watching me. The one in the middle still held his sign, but now I could see the other side. "Next time, don't stop," it read. I peeled out onto the road, gravel spraying behind me. In my rear-view mirror, I saw the clowns grow smaller and smaller until they disappeared into the night. I didn't slow down until I reached the main highway. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over. As the adrenaline faded, I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. What the hell had just happened? Part of me wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe I dozed off at the wheel and dreamed up this nightmare scenario. But the gravel dust on my clothes and the lingering scent of grease paint in my nose told me it had been all too real. I sat there for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Were they criminals hiding out in the woods? Some kind of twisted pranksters? Or was there a darker explanation, one I couldn't even begin to comprehend? In the end, I decided it didn't matter. I was alive, unharmed, and had been given a second chance. I pulled back onto the road, heading home with a newfound appreciation for the safety of my boring, clown-free life. But as I drove, a nagging thought wormed its way into my mind. The sign had said, "Next time, don't stop." Next time? Would there be a next time? I found myself scanning the roadsides, jumping at every flash of white in my peripheral vision. The woods suddenly seemed more menacing, as if they were hiding secrets I'd only caught a glimpse of. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a few extra moments, gathering the courage to step out into the darkness. I hurried to my front door, fumbling with my keys as if those painted faces might materialize from the shadows at any moment. Once inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, letting out a shaky breath. I was home. I was safe. But as I walked past the hall mirror, I caught a glimpse of something that made my heart stop. There, barely visible on the collar of my scrubs, was a smear of white grease paint. I stared at my reflection, my mind racing. Had one of them touched me without me realizing? Or, with trembling fingers, I reached up and touched my face. The makeup smeared further, revealing a hint of red underneath. I screamed then, a primal sound of terror and disbelief. I ran to the bathroom, desperate to see my full reflection. But the mirror showed only an ordinary, terrified woman. No clown makeup, no red nose. Just me, pale and shaking. I splashed water on my face, scrubbing until my skin was raw. There was no trace of makeup, no evidence of what I thought I'd seen. Had it all been in my head? Was I losing my mind? I sank to the bathroom floor, hugging my knees to my chest. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to make sense of what had happened. The clowns on the road had been real. I was sure of that. But this was something else. Something worse. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the window, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this, jumping at shadows and doubting my own sanity. I had to go back. I had to find out the truth. I stood up, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. I would drive that road again tonight. I would find those clowns and demand answers. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning. What if they found me first? What if, this time, they didn't let me go? I pushed the thought away and began to prepare. Whatever happened tonight, I would face it head on. No more running. No more fear. As I gathered supplies and planned my route, I caught my reflection in the mirror once more. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw a flash of that cruel, painted smile. But when I blinked, it was gone. Just my own determined face staring back at me. I took a deep breath and nodded at my reflection. Tonight, I said aloud, my voice steady. Tonight, we find out the truth. Little did I know. The truth would be far more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. But that's a story for another time. For now, I have preparations to make. After all, the show must go on. I've worked a lot of night shifts in my life, but none quite like that one. It's funny how a single night can change everything. How the mundane can become a nightmare in the blink of an eye. Or in my case, in the tap of a gloved finger on glass. It was a Tuesday night in October, unseasonably cold for our small Midwestern town. I'd been working the graveyard shift at the quick stop gas station on the edge of town for about 6 months. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and gave me plenty of time to study for my online classes. The night started like any other. I arrived at 11 p.m., relieved the evening shift guy, and settled in for a long, quiet night of restocking shelves and ringing up the occasional insomniac or trucker. Around 2 a.m., I was behind the counter, half-heartedly flipping through a textbook when I heard it, a soft tapping sound. So faint I almost missed it over the hum of the refrigerators. I looked up, my eyes scanning the empty store. Nothing seemed out of place, just rows of snacks and drinks, bathed in the harsh fluorescent light. I shrugged it off as my imagination and went back to my book. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. This time, I knew it was real. I stood up, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "Hello," I called out. "Is someone there?" Silence. I walked out from behind the counter, peering down each aisle. The store was empty. I was about to chalk it up to nerves when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned toward the front of the store, and that's when I saw him. A clown, standing just outside the glass doors, his face pressed against the window. Now, I'm not usually one to judge, but this wasn't your average birthday party clown. His makeup was smeared and distorted, like he'd been out in the rain. The bright colors of his costume seemed garish and wrong in the dimness of the night, but it was his expression that really got to me. He was smiling, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was wide and forced, stretching his painted face into something inhuman. I stood there, frozen, as he raised a gloved hand and tapped on the glass again. Tap, tap, tap. "We're closed." I managed to croak out, pointing at the hour sign on the door. The clown's smile widened impossibly further. He shook his head slowly and tapped again, more insistently this time. I backed up, my mind racing. This had to be some kind of joke, right? Maybe one of my friends trying to freak me out? "Look, buddy," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I can't let you in. Store policy. Come back in the morning, okay?" The clown's expression didn't change, but he stopped tapping. Instead, he pressed both hands against the glass and just stared. I retreated behind the counter, my hands shaking as I reached for the phone. I needed to call someone, the police, my manager, anyone. But when I picked up the receiver, there was no dial tone, just dead silence. My blood ran cold. I tried again, pressing buttons frantically, but nothing happened. The phone was dead. I looked back up at the clown. He hadn't moved, but somehow he seemed closer, even though he was still on the other side of the glass. I grabbed my cell phone from my pocket, but of course, there was no signal. There never was out here, which is why we had the landline in the first place. Panic started to set in. I was alone in the middle of the night, with no way to call for help. And outside, that thing was waiting. I looked around desperately for something, anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes fell on the baseball bat we kept under the counter for emergencies. I grabbed it, the solid weight of it in my hands providing a small measure of comfort. When I looked back at the door, the clown was gone. For a moment, relief washed over me. Maybe he'd given up and left. Maybe this whole thing had been a stress-induced hallucination. But then I heard it, a sound that made my blood freeze in my veins. The soft jingle of bells, coming from somewhere inside the store. I whirled around, bat raised, my eyes darting from aisle to aisle. How had he gotten in? I hadn't heard the door open. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking. "I'm armed and I've called the police. You need to leave. Now." Silence. Then, from the back of the store, came a low, gurgling laugh. I backed up against the counter, my knuckles white on the bat. I couldn't see him, but I knew he was in here with me, watching, waiting. The refrigerator seemed to hum louder. The fluorescent lights flickered. The normal, everyday sounds of the store became menacing, masking any noise the intruder might make. I don't know how long I stood there, every muscle tense, straining to hear or see any sign of the clown. It felt like hours, but it was probably only minutes. Then movement, a flash of color between the aisles. I swung the bat reflexively, connecting with nothing but air. Another giggle, this time from a different direction. I spun around, my breath coming in short gasps. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Money? Take it. Just leave me alone." In response, all the lights in the store went out at once. I was plunged into darkness, the only illumination coming from the moon outside and the still humming refrigerators. I couldn't help it. I screamed. In the silence that followed, I heard the unmistakable sound of slow, heavy breathing. Close. Too close. I swung the bat blindly, feeling it whoosh through empty air. I stumbled forward, my free hand outstretched, trying to find my way to the door. My fingers brushed against something soft and yielding, something that shouldn't have been there. A gloved hand closed around my wrist. I jerked back, swinging the bat with all my might. There was a sickening thud, and the grip on my arm loosened. I ran. I didn't know where I was going in the darkness, but I ran. I collided with shelves, sending products clattering to the floor. I tripped and fell, scrambling back to my feet, the bat lost somewhere in the chaos. Finally, my hands found the cool glass of the front doors. I pushed, but they didn't budge. Locked. I was locked in with that thing. I turned, pressing my back against the door, trying to see through the darkness. The store was silent except for my ragged breathing. Then, slowly, the lights began to flicker back on, one by one, illuminating empty aisles. No sign of the clown, no sign of any disturbance, save for the products I'd knocked over in my blind panic. Had I imagined it all? I stood there for a long time, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The store remained quiet and empty. Eventually, I managed to unlock the door with shaking hands. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. I looked back at the store, through the windows. I could see everything was normal. No creepy clown, no signs of a struggle, just an ordinary gas station convenience store. I considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? That I'd been attacked by a clown who vanished into thin air? That I'd potentially assaulted a customer who might not even exist? In the end, I did the only thing I could do. I went back inside, cleaned up the mess I'd made, and finished my shift. When my relief arrived at 7 a.m., I didn't say a word about what had happened. I just clocked out and went home, convinced I'd had some kind of stress-induced breakdown. It wasn't until I was undressing for a shower that I saw it. There, on my wrist where the gloved hand had grabbed me, was a perfect imprint of fingers, in grease paint. I quit my job that day, found a new one with daytime hours, and lots of people around. I don't work nights anymore. I don't go out alone after dark, because I know now that sometimes the monsters are real. Sometimes they wear painted smiles and come tapping at your door in the dead of night. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, they let you live to tell the tale. But always, always, they leave their mark. You never think it'll happen to you. That's what I kept telling myself as I stared at the red balloon bobbing gently in my backyard. But there it was, a splash of crimson against the darkness, and I knew my life would never be the same. It started like any other mind-numbing Tuesday night. I was sprawled on my bed, scrolling through TikTok, trying to distract myself from the mountain of homework I was definitely not doing. My parents were out at some work thing, leaving me alone in our too-big house on the edge of town. I barely noticed when my phone buzzed with a news alert, probably another political scandal or celebrity breakup. But something made me tap on it, and that's when I saw the headline, "Clown Sightings Reported in Local Neighborhood." I rolled my eyes. This again? Hadn't we done the whole creepy clown thing a few years back? But as I skimmed the article, a chill ran down my spine. The sightings were in my neighborhood, on my street. Witnesses describe a figure in a clown costume, standing motionless on lawns, or peering into windows. The article read, "Police urge residents to remain calm but vigilant." I snorted. Calm? Yeah, right. I fired off a text to my best friend, Zoe. "You see this clown BS? Someone's watched IT one too many times." Her reply came seconds later. "OMG, yes. Freaky AF. You okay alone?" I was about to type back a snarky response when I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible sound coming from outside my window. Like laughter? My heart started racing. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind or a neighbor's TV, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Slowly, I got up from my bed and crept towards a window. My hands were shaking as I gripped the curtain. Part of me didn't want to look, didn't want to make this real, but I had to know. I took a deep breath and yanked the curtain open. Nothing, just the dark silhouettes of trees against the night sky. I let out a shaky laugh, relief washing over me. God, I was being stupid, getting worked up over some dumb internet hoax. That's when I saw it. A flicker of movement in the yard below. Something rising slowly into view. A red balloon. I stumbled back from the window, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a prank, right? Some idiot kid trying to scare people. But then I saw the hand. A white-gloved hand reaching up, grasping the balloon string. And behind it, emerging from the shadows, a face. Pale, with a red nose and a wide, painted smile that seemed to glow in the darkness. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew this was no prank. The look in those eyes was ancient, hungry, inhuman. The clown raised its other hand and pressed a finger to its lips. Sure, then it popped the balloon. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet night. I screamed and fell backwards, scrambling away from the window. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. I had to call someone, the police, my parents, anyone. But as I looked down at my screen, my blood ran cold. No signal. A soft tap on the window made me jump. I looked up, dreading what I'd see. The clown was there, its face pressed against the glass. That terrible smile stretched even wider as it raised a gloved hand and waved. I ran, out of my room, down the stairs, nearly falling in my panic. I had to get out, had to find help, but as I reached for the front door, I froze. What if it was out there, waiting for me? A creak from upstairs sent a fresh wave of terror through me. It was in the house. I darted into the kitchen, grabbing the biggest knife I could find. My mind was racing, trying to think of a way out. The back door? No, I'd seen it in the yard. The garage? Maybe I could get to my car. As I crept towards the garage door, a floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, knife raised, but the hallway was empty, just shadows and silence. I backed into the garage, fumbling for the light switch. The fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, illuminating my dad's workbench and our cars. Safety was just a few steps away. I rushed to my beat-up Corolla, yanking on the door handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. Where were my keys? The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They were in my room, where I'd left them when I got home from school. A soft giggle echoed through the garage, and I whirled around. There, in the doorway, stood the clown. It cocked its head to the side, regarding me with those ancient, hungry eyes. "Stay back," I yelled, brandishing the knife. My voice sounded high and thin, even to my own ears. "I'm warning you." The clown took a step forward, its oversized shoes squeaking on the concrete floor. Another step, and another. I backed up until I hit the garage door. Trapped. The clown stopped a few feet away, its smile never wavering. Slowly, deliberately, it reached into its pocket and pulled something out. My keys. It had my keys. It dangled them in front of me, the metal catching the light. An offering, or a taunt. "What do you want?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Please, just leave me alone." The clown's other hand moved and I flinched, expecting an attack. But instead, it held up a balloon, red, like the one in the yard. As I watched, it began to inflate, growing larger and larger until it filled the space between us. The clown released a balloon, and it drifted towards me. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there, but I was frozen, transfixed by the bobbing red sphere. As the balloon touched my face, I felt a strange sensation, like static electricity, but stronger. My vision blurred, the garage spinning around me. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the clown's face, that terrible smile stretching impossibly wide. And then, nothing. I woke up in my bed, sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, I lay there, confused. Had it all been a dream? But then I saw it. There, on my nightstand, was a red balloon, and tied to its string were my car keys. I've tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that I imagined it all or sleepwalked or something, anything to explain what happened that night. But I know the truth. I see it in the way my parents look at me now, worry etched in their faces, in the whispers that follow me at school, the sidelong glances from people who've heard the stories. Because I wasn't the only one. All over town, people had similar experiences that night. Clown sightings, red balloons, missing time. Some people moved away. Others pretend it never happened. Me, I'm still here, still trying to make sense of it all. Because I know it's not over. That wasn't an ending that night in the garage. It was a beginning. Sometimes, late at night, I hear a faint laugh on the wind, or catch a glimpse of red out of the corner of my eye. And I wonder, when will the clown return? And what will it want next time? I keep the red balloon in my closet now, hidden away but never forgotten. A reminder that the world is stranger and more dangerous than we want to believe. And that sometimes, the monsters wear painted smiles and come bearing gifts we never asked for. So if you see a red balloon floating by some dark night, or hear the faint jingle of bells when no one's around, remember my story. And whatever you do, don't let it in. I always thought the expression, "the past comes back to haunt you," was just a metaphor. That is, until we moved into the old Wilkinson house on Maple Street. Now, I know better. Sometimes the past doesn't just haunt you. Sometimes it comes back wearing grease paint and a red nose. It all started on a sweltering July afternoon. My wife, Sarah, and I had just signed the papers on our first home, a beautiful Victorian fixer-upper that we'd gotten for a steal. The real estate agent had mumbled something about the house's colorful history, but we were too excited about the wraparound porch and original hardwood floors to pay much attention. We spent that first day moving boxes and exploring our new home. It was while investigating a stuck door on the third floor that we discovered the attic entrance. A pull-down ladder creaked ominously as I tugged it open, releasing a cloud of dust that made us both cough. "Think there's buried treasure up there?" Sarah joked, peering into the gloom above us. I grinned and gave her a quick kiss. Only one way to find out: Indiana Jones. The attic was like something out of a Gothic novel. Cobwebs draped every surface, and the air was thick with the musty smell of age. Sheets covered lumpy shapes that I assumed were old furniture, but it was the trunk that caught my eye. Sitting in a shaft of sunlight from the dirty window was an ornate steamer trunk. Its leather was cracked with age, but the brass fittings still gleamed dully in the dim light. "Whoa," Sarah breathed, running her hand over the lid. "Think we should open it?" I hesitated. There was something about the trunk that made me uneasy, though I couldn't put my finger on why. But Sarah was already working at the clasp, her face alight with curiosity. The lid creaked open, releasing another cloud of dust. We peered inside, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The trunk was filled with costumes, but not just any costumes. Clown costumes. There were at least a dozen of them, in every color imaginable. Ruffled collars, oversized shoes, and pointy hats were jumbled together in a riot of faded fabric. And nestled among them were several aged photographs. Sarah pulled one out, squinting at it in the dim light. "Oh my God, Mark, look at this." The photo showed a group of clowns standing in front of a circus tent. But there was something off about their expressions. Their smiles seemed forced, almost pained. And their eyes, there was a darkness there that made my skin crawl. "Creepy," I muttered, taking the photo from her. Wonder who they were. Sarah was already digging deeper into the trunk. "There's more stuff in here. Makeup kits, props. Oh, and look, there's an envelope." She pulled out a yellowed envelope, carefully opening it to reveal a stack of newspaper clippings. As we read them, a chill ran down my spine despite the attic stuffy heat. The clippings told a disturbing story. A traveling circus in the 1920s. A series of mysterious disappearances in every town they visited. And at the center of it all, a troupe of clowns who were never seen without their makeup. "This is wild," Sarah said, her voice a mix of fascination and unease. "Do you think this stuff belonged to them?" I was about to answer when a gust of wind blew through the attic, slamming the trunk lid shut with a bang that made us both jump. "Okay, that's enough ghost stories for one day," I laughed nervously. "Let's get back to unpacking." We closed up the attic and tried to put the strange trunk out of our minds. But as night fell and we settled into our new bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The house seemed different somehow. Watchful. It was around midnight when we heard it. Footsteps in the attic. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Old houses make noise, right? But then came the unmistakable sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor above us. Sarah clutched my arm, her eyes wide in the darkness. "Mark, what is that?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Probably just the wind moving something around. I'll go check it out." I grabbed a flashlight and made my way to the attic stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached for the pull-down ladder, I hesitated. Did I really want to know what was up there? The decision was made for me when the ladder suddenly dropped down on its own, missing my face by inches. I stumbled back, the flashlight beam dancing wildly across the walls. And then I saw it, a flash of white face paint, a red nose, a smile that was too wide to be human. I ran back to our bedroom, slamming the door behind me. Sarah was sitting up in bed, her face pale in the moonlight. "Mark, what is it? What did you see?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. How could I tell her that I'd seen a clown in our attic, that the costumes we'd found were somehow alive? Before I could find my voice, the power went out. The sudden darkness was suffocating, broken only by the weak beam of my flashlight. And then we heard it, the soft jingle of bells, coming from right outside our bedroom door. Sarah muffled a scream as the doorknob slowly began to turn. I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a table lamp, and braced myself for whatever was about to come through that door. But nothing could have prepared me for what we saw. The door swung open to reveal not one, but 3 clowns. Their makeup was smeared and faded, their costumes tattered. But their eyes were alive with a hungry light that made my blood run cold. They stood there, silent and still, for what felt like an eternity. And then, as one, they began to laugh. It was a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before, hollow and echoing, as if it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Sarah screamed then, the sound breaking whatever spell had held us paralyzed. I swung the lamp wildly, connecting with the nearest clown's head with a sickening thud. It went down, but the others kept coming, their gloved hands reaching for us. Somehow, we made it past them and down the stairs. We ran out of the house in our pajamas, not stopping until we reached our car. As we peeled out of the driveway, I caught one last glimpse of our new home in the rearview mirror. There, silhouetted in the attic window, were 3 figures, watching us go. We drove all night, stopping only when the sun came up and we were 2 states away. We got a hotel room and tried to make sense of what had happened. Maybe it was just a really vivid nightmare, Sarah suggested, though her shaking hands betrayed her doubt. I wanted to believe her, wanted to think that we'd both just had some kind of shared hallucination brought on by the stress of moving. But I knew better. We never went back to that house, left everything behind and started over in a new city. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the faint jingle of bells. And in my dreams, I see those hungry, painted smiles. The police report said it was a break-in, that some local kids had probably snuck in and tried to scare us as a prank. They found the trunk in the attic, empty now except for a single red nose. But I know the truth. Those clowns, whatever they were, had been waiting, trapped in that trunk for who knows how long, until someone came along and set them free. I often wonder about the family that moves in next. Will they find an old trunk in the attic? Will they be curious enough to open it? And if they do, will they hear the laughter, the soft jingle of bells in the night? Because I know now that some things are better left buried. Some doors should remain closed. And some trunks should never, ever be opened. So if you're ever in an old attic and you come across a strange trunk, remember my story. And whatever you do, don't open it, because you never know what might be waiting inside, hungry for a new audience. And clowns, after all, live for the laughter. I always thought the worst thing that could happen on my way home from class was getting caught in the rain without an umbrella. But that was before I took the shortcut through the abandoned circus grounds. Before I learned that sometimes the things we think are long gone are just waiting for the right moment to resurface. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air smells like wood smoke and possibility. I was running late for dinner with my roommates, having lost track of time in the library again. As I hurried across campus, I remembered the old circus grounds I'd heard about from some of the local students. They said it was a quicker way to get to my side of town, cutting through the woods instead of following the winding streets. I hesitated at the edge of the tree line, peering down the overgrown path. The fading sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting eerie shadows on the ground. A cool breeze rustled the branches, carrying with it the faintest hint of popcorn. I shook my head, chalking it up to an overactive imagination fueled by too much caffeine and not enough sleep. With one last glance at my watch, I made my decision. I'd take the shortcut. What was the worst that could happen? The path was rougher than I expected, roots and fallen branches threatening to trip me at every step. But as I pushed deeper into the woods, the trees began to thin out, revealing the remnants of what must have once been a magical place. Faded banners hung limply from rusted poles, their once bright colors now muted by years of neglect. The skeletal remains of carnival rides loomed in the growing darkness, their silhouettes like monstrous creatures frozen in mid-roar. And everywhere, scattered like fallen soldiers, were the decaying props of a long-dead circus. I slowed my pace, fascination overriding my initial desire to hurry home. My eyes darted from one abandoned attraction to another, trying to imagine what this place must have been like in its heyday. The laughter, the music, the excitement. That's when I saw it, or rather, him. At first, I thought it was just another prop, a forgotten mannequin left to the mercy of the elements. But as I drew closer, I realized with a start that this was no lifeless dummy. It was a clown. He stood perfectly still in the center of what must have been the main circus ring, his white makeup cracked and peeling, his costume a tattered rainbow of faded colors. But it was his eyes that caught me, held me rooted to the spot. They were alive, alert, and fixed directly on me. My heart began to race, every instinct screaming at me to run. But I couldn't move. It was as if those eyes had cast some sort of spell, freezing me in place as surely as if I'd been turned to stone. Slowly, So slowly I wasn't sure at first if I was imagining it. The clown raised one gloved hand, a finger pressed against painted lips in the universal gesture for silence. I wanted to scream, to call for help, to do anything but stand there, staring at this impossible figure from a bygone era. But no sound came out. My voice, like my body, was paralyzed. The clown took a step forward, his oversized shoes making no sound on the dusty ground. Another step, and another. With each movement, I felt my panic rising, threatening to choke me. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that I could smell the musty odor of old grease paint and mothballs. His painted smile seemed to widen as he tilted his head, studying me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. And then he spoke. "Welcome," he said, his voice a raspy whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We've been waiting for you." I found my voice then, a strangled what? Escaping my lips. The clown's smile grew impossibly wider. For someone to see us, to remember us. He gestured around at the abandoned circus grounds. "We've been here all along, you know, waiting for the right audience." As if on cue, I began to notice movement all around us. Shadows detaching themselves from the darkness, taking shape as they approached. More clowns, acrobats, animal tamers with phantom beasts prowling at their heels. The circus was coming to life around me, but it was wrong, distorted, like a funhouse mirror reflection of what it once had been. "No!" I managed to choke out, finally finding the strength to take a step back. "This isn't real. You're not real." The clown's laughter was like the crackle of dead leaves. "Oh, but we are. More real than you can imagine. And now that you're here, the show can finally begin." I turned to run, but the path I'd come down was gone, swallowed up by the encroaching circus tents that now surrounded us. Calliope music began to play, a discordant melody that set my teeth on edge. "Ladies and gentlemen," the clown announced, his voice booming out across the grounds. "Welcome to the greatest show you'll ever see." The other figures began to move then, each starting their own macabre performance. Acrobats swung from invisible trapezes, their limbs bending at impossible angles. A lion tamer cracked his whip at snarling beasts made of shadow and mist. And everywhere I looked, there were clowns, juggling balls that looked suspiciously like human skulls, performing magic tricks that defied the laws of physics and sanity. All of them watching me with those two alive eyes, their smiles never wavering. I ran, ducking under tents, weaving between performers, desperately searching for a way out. But no matter which direction I turned, I always seemed to end up back in that central ring. The first clown was waiting for me there, his arms spread wide as if to welcome me home. "Why do you run?" he asked, his head cocked to one side. "Aren't you enjoying the show?" "Please," I gasped, out of breath and out of hope. "I just want to go home." His painted features softened into something almost like pity. "But don't you see? You are home. The circus is for everyone, and everyone is for the circus. Once you're part of the act, you never really leave." As he spoke, I felt a strange sensation creeping over me. My skin began to tingle, and when I looked down at my hands, I saw with horror that they were changing. Pale white makeup spreading like a disease, fingers elongating into exaggerated parodies of themselves. "No!" I screamed, clawing at my face, feeling the sticky grease paint there. "This isn't happening." The clown's laughter echoed around me, joined by the entire circus in a cacophony of mad mirth. "The show must go on," he said, reaching out to me with those two long arms. "And now you're part of it." I closed my eyes, willing it all to be a nightmare, praying to wake up in my dorm room, safe and sound. But when I opened them again, nothing had changed. The circus still swirled around me in a kaleidoscope of twisted imagery, and my own reflection in a nearby funhouse mirror showed a face I no longer recognized. As the realization of my fate sank in, I felt something inside me break. And then, to my horror, I began to laugh, a high, unhinged sound that barely seemed human. The clown nodded approvingly. "There it is," he said softly. "The sound of someone joining the eternal circus. Welcome home, little one. I'd like to say I fought it, that I found some hidden reserve of strength and broke free of the nightmare. But the truth is, once the laughter started, it didn't stop. It bubbled up from some dark place inside me, drowning out my fear, my doubts, my very sense of self. And as I laughed, I felt myself changing, not just on the outside, but deep within. The person I had been, the student, the friend, the daughter, faded away like an old photograph, replaced by something other. Now, I stand in the center ring, my painted smile never wavering. I juggle impossible objects and perform tricks that defy explanation. And I wait, we all wait, for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon our little slice of eternity. So let this be a warning to you, dear reader. If you ever find yourself walking near an abandoned circus ground and you hear the faint strains of calliope music on the wind, turn back. Run if you have to, because once you step into our ring, once you become part of the show, well, the show must go on, and it goes on forever.